Some spaces pull you in, while others push you away, and you feel it before you even know why. It's not superstition. It's not about chanting lucky coins or colorful bracelets. It's about the invisible architecture of energy, how your home either supports your success or slowly wears it down. On this channel, New Day Mindfulness, we don't talk about magic. We talk about flow. We explore how simple, grounded shifts can invite wealth, protect your peace, and realign your life with the momentum you've been missing. And today we begin with a plant so familiar, you've probably walked past it without thinking twice. Aloe vera. But don't mistake it for just a kitchen remedy. In Feng Shui, this humble succulent is a directional force, absorbing toxic energy, softening sauce, and holding qi in all the places it tends to slip away. Think of it not as a decoration, but as a low-maintenance guardian of energy. But aloe is only the beginning. There are 6 more plants we'll explore, each with a specific role to play. Not generic luck charms, not vague positivity symbols. These are targeted energy tools for strategic wealth placement, career elevation, relationship balance, and intergenerational harmony. Each one does something different, and once you understand where to place them and why, you'll never look at your space the same way again. And here's the thing no one talks about. It's not just about the plant. It's about how the energy moves through your home and how your home speaks back to your goals. Energy is always communicating. Either it's reinforcing your ambition or it's silently slowing you down. So if you've ever felt stuck, overlooked, or just drained inside your own space, it's not your fault, but it is your cue. You're here because something in you already knows your environment could be doing more for you, that your space could support the version of you that's ready to rise, not just recover. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. These aren't theories, they're practices. They're small shifts with massive impact. And by the end of this video, you'll know how to make your space work harder for your peace, your progress, and your prosperity. But before we explore the placements and properties of these powerful plants, I want to ask you for something simple in return. If this channel helps you find clarity, focus, or even just one idea that shifts your day, help me reach the next milestone. Give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone whose home and heart might need this just as much as you do. We're on our way to 2,000 followers, and every click helps me keep showing up with deeper, more practical wisdom for your everyday energy. Now, let's begin with the plant you probably already have sitting quietly by a window, not knowing it holds the key to your home's energetic strength. Aloe vera. Not just healing your skin, but anchoring your space. Let's look at why. Aloe vera. Not just healing, but energetic direction. Aloe vera, while often associated with skincare and traditional healing, holds far greater influence when examined through the lens of practical Feng Shui. In this system of environmental energy alignment, aloe vera is classified under the wood element, a symbol of renewal, forward movement, and growth. But beyond symbolism, its function is energetically structural. It's not decorative fluff, and it's not merely a plant to absorb bad vibes in the way pop culture might suggest. Its true value lies in its ability to moderate, direct, and buffer the flow of qi, particularly in homes where energy feels chaotic, uncentered, or heavy without explanation. From a structural standpoint, aloe vera works like a silent circuit breaker, absorbing energetic overload and redirecting excessive or misaligned movement within a space. Imagine living in a home that always feels slightly restless. You might not see clutter, but you can feel agitation. Or perhaps the space feels emotionally heavy, like it traps anxiety or holds past conflict. This isn't imagination, it's an energy imbalance. And aloe vera is one of the few living tools that can help stabilize that imbalance without requiring a full design overhaul. Its presence introduces a quiet, rooted pulse into the space, one that is gentle but directive, one that doesn't push energy out aggressively, but instead teaches it where to settle. This quality becomes especially important in modern urban homes where high floors, large glass windows, or overexposure to electromagnetic frequency can fracture the energetic field. In these environments, qi moves fast, then disperses, leaving the occupants feeling either overstimulated or depleted. Aloe vera, by contrast, anchors. It helps qi stay longer. It invites it to linger in the right corners rather than rush out the wrong ones. Now consider the first critical placement zone, the front door. In Feng Shui, the front door isn't just a boundary, it's the mouth of qi. It's where energy enters your life. When this area is energetically unprotected, it can behave like an open floodgate. Qi pours in too fast, or worse, slips right back out. If your front door faces a busy street, sharp corners from another building, or an elevator directly across the hall, the incoming energy arrives aggressively, like a storm with no buffer. Placing aloe vera near the front entrance turns it into an energetic doorman, not blocking energy, but slowing it, screening it, tempering its speed so it doesn't blast into your personal space like an uninvited guest. This is especially useful in high-rise apartments or homes situated near fast-moving roads, parking garages, or alleyways, where the direction and velocity of external energy are unpredictable and often disruptive. The aloe acts as a soft filter, absorbing the excess and allowing only the steady, useful energy to flow inward. The second placement worth serious attention is the work desk or study area. This is especially relevant now, when more people are working from home, managing businesses online, or pursuing independent income streams. The area where you focus your mind is also the area most vulnerable to scatter energy. Think about how many hours you spend in front of a screen. Email open, tabs running, phone buzzing. That space becomes energetically noisy, and noise weakens intention. Aloe vera helps reduce this friction. Not only does it absorb electromagnetic residue from screens and routers, but it acts as a stabilizer for mental qi, what we might describe as clarity or cognitive alignment. For entrepreneurs or freelancers especially, placing aloe vera in the southeast sector of the desk, the traditional Feng Shui wealth corner, can act like a symbolic assistant, helping you direct your focus toward decisions that invite prosperity rather than distraction. It's not about magical results. It's about environment design that supports consistent, focused output. The third area, and perhaps the most overlooked, is the balcony or external ledge. People often beautify balconies with trailing plants or furniture, but forget that in Feng Shui, balconies are energetic thresholds. They are where external energy attempts to make its way into your home, or where internal energy risks leaking out. In high-rise settings, balconies become exit points for qi, especially when there's a lot of wind, noise, traffic, or visual clutter outside. Aloe vera in this context is a soft guard. It absorbs overstimulation, dampens the sharpness of external energy, and holds internal qi inside the home longer. This is crucial in cities where you're exposed to construction zones, heavy movement, or visual sha qi, cutting energy from neighboring buildings. Placing aloe in these spaces helps ground the flow. It gives the energy somewhere to pause rather than scatter. Think of it as placing a boulder in a fast-moving stream. It redirects the water, slows it slightly, and preserves the surrounding terrain. To help anchor this concept, think of aloe vera like a surge protector in your home. In the same way a surge protector doesn't only block electricity but regulates its flow, aloe vera doesn't block qi but modulates it. It ensures your space doesn't become overwhelmed by excess activity scattered thought, or environmental chaos. And this is not theoretical. There is observable feedback from people who live in homes with too much chi movement, anxiety, poor sleep, difficulty concentrating, or feeling constantly distracted. Aloe vera addresses this energetically in a way no synthetic object can. It's alive. It responds to the space. It adjusts. And it communicates that the person who placed it is aware, not of aesthetics, but of function. It's also important to note what aloe vera cannot do. It's not suited for the living room, especially open-plan designs where commanding energy is needed. Living rooms are active, social, and often a point of lively chai. Aloe's energy is inward-facing, soothing, and absorptive, which can flatten the vitality of a communal area. Instead of amplifying connection and presence, it might unintentionally mute it. So while it is effective in transitional or restorative spaces, it should not be applied everywhere indiscriminately. Feng Shui, after all, is not about filling your home with symbolic objects. It's about selecting the right object for the right function, in the right location, to achieve the right result. Finally, remember that the power of aloe vera doesn't lie in the plant itself. It lies in your intent. When you place it with clarity, you activate its symbolic and energetic purpose. When you care for it, you reinforce the message, I am building a space that supports me. That message echoes in the way your day unfolds, the way your thoughts move, the way your finances respond, and even the way others interact with you. Aloe is quiet but powerful. It doesn't demand attention, but over time it earns it by holding the energy you didn't realize you were losing. And that is what makes it one of the most important plants to incorporate in any serious Feng Shui practice. Not because it's trendy, not because it's easy to grow, but because it creates the kind of space where the best version of your life can take root and thrive. Clove plant, symbol of stored wealth and stabilization. In the practice of Feng Shui, the clove plant holds a uniquely grounded role. It's not designed to energize, accelerate, or even attract in the same way some high chai plants might be. But instead, it is a stabilizer, a keeper of what has already been earned. This makes it especially valuable in situations where energy is not necessarily absent, but unstable, where income comes in bursts and expenses never seem to pause, or where effort is being exerted but the results are scattered or inconsistent. The clove, with its deep, warming fragrance and compact structure, speaks not of outward ambition, but of careful preservation. In Feng Shui terms, it is a representation of stored wealth, conservative growth, and energetic resilience. That distinction is critical. Where many people chase fast results, the clove encourages us to secure the ground we're standing on first. The symbolism here is subtle but powerful. In its natural form, clove is a spice with a long shelf life, used traditionally to preserve, embalm, and protect both physical and energetic forms. That same function translates into its Feng Shui use. It helps preserve financial energy, retain value, and slow unnecessary outflow. When placed intentionally in a space, it communicates to the energy field of the home or workspace. This is not a place of leakage or waste. This is a place where money is respected, stored, and sustained. It's a nuanced energy, but a deeply important one, especially for self-employed individuals, freelancers, business owners, or anyone whose income relies on initiative and output rather than predictability. The most effective use of cloves begins with placement. One of the best locations is the work desk, not just anywhere, but near areas where financial decision-making or transactions occur. This could mean the corner of the desk where invoices are paid, a shelf where credit cards are stored, or even beside a calculator, ledger, or client contract binder. The key is to place cloves near items that symbolically represent financial control or responsibility. When the clove sits in these areas, it acts as a subtle, energetic companion, an anchor for disciplined thought, stable decision-making, and long-term strategy. It doesn't encourage risk, it encourages retention. Another highly functional placement is inside a cash drawer, safe box, or financial filing cabinet. The message this sends is layered. Not only are we actively holding wealth, but we are consciously protecting its energetic integrity. Cash drawers, by their nature, are high-flow areas. Money enters, exits, circulates. Without energetic reinforcement, these spots can become overly dynamic, leading to leakage. Adding a small cluster of cloves here brings in the energy of intentional slowing, of wise management. In traditional Chinese energy theory, this is known as harmonizing the Sheng Qi, growth energy, with Yin Earth principles, creating balance between gain and security. But as important as placement is, caution is equally essential. The clove should never be placed in restrooms or kitchens. These are zones of release and consumption, spaces where energy naturally cycles out. Kitchens, especially when active with fire, stoves, ovens, disrupt the gentle, stable frequency that clove holds. Restrooms, due to plumbing and drainage, represent constant outflow. Any plant or object meant to retain or stabilize wealth will have its energy diluted or neutralized in these zones. To put it simply, clove in a restroom is a message to the universe that stored wealth belongs in places of loss. And in Feng Shui, symbolism is everything. Now, to contextualize the clove's symbolic power, let's briefly consider a well-known figure, Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, Oprah was known to keep meaningful items in her personal space, objects that represented value, growth, and the life she envisioned for herself. She surrounded herself not with luxury, but with reminders of what mattered, of what she had earned and what she was building. Though she likely never called them Feng Shui tools, her environment was rich with intentional symbolism. That's the role the clove plays. It's not flashy, it doesn't announce itself, but it whispers a message to your subconscious and your space. We hold on to what we've worked for. That in turn shapes how opportunities unfold. From a practical standpoint, cloves are also remarkably easy to work with. They do not require watering, lighting conditions, or potting. They can be kept in a simple fabric pouch, a ceramic bowl, or a wooden box. Their aromatic oil retains its potency for months, even years, which means their energetic signature remains active long after they are placed. Some practitioners even use clove oil in very small amounts to anoint the corners of cash drawers or ledgers, further embedding the energy of protection and stability into their financial environment. This ritual, though subtle, can create a psychological shift, a reinforcement of disciplined financial behavior and thoughtful spending. For families, cloves can be integrated into collective wealth practices as well. For instance, placing a small pouch of cloves near the family savings area, joint bank documents, or investment folders reinforces a shared message of retention and security. This is especially useful in households where multiple people contribute financially and where income structures are complex. The clove becomes not just a personal energetic stabilizer, but a shared one, anchoring the home's financial vibration to long-term stewardship rather than momentary splurging. Moreover, in homes where past financial trauma exists, whether from bankruptcy, job loss, or debt, cloves can play an emotional role in helping reset the energy of the space. In Feng Shui, memory isn't just psychological. It lives in walls, corners, drawers. If a space has witnessed consistent financial instability, that instability becomes embedded in its energetic field. Cloves, by introducing the energy of containment and grounding, help rewrite that energetic memory. It tells the space, the cycle has changed. When used in this way, the placement of cloves is not about attracting more. It's about losing less. And sometimes that's the most powerful wealth move of all. It's also worth noting that clove use extends to transitional financial moments. When starting a new job, opening a business, launching a side project, or renegotiating contracts, cloves act as a symbolic stabilizer. They remind you not just to build, but to secure, not just to spend, but to manage. Placing cloves in the first financial envelope received from a new client or in the drawer of a new business location can anchor that opportunity in steady, grounded energy. It's a way of marking the start of not just activity, but stewardship. And that's the heart of it, stewardship. In Feng Shui, wealth is not about accumulation. It's about circulation without loss. It's about honoring what comes in, respecting what stays, and knowing how to pause before it flows away. The clove embodies that pause, that moment between earning and spending, that breath between desire and decision. And in today's world, where money moves fast, expectations are high, and energy is constantly consumed, that pause is sacred. The message here is not to chase prosperity with more force. It's to hold what you have with more care. Cloves are your tool for that. They don't grow quickly, they don't bloom, but they preserve, they last. And in energy terms, their quiet resilience speaks volumes. They tell your space and your habits that you're not just reacting, you're anchoring. You're choosing long-term wealth over momentary reward, and in that choice, you become a partner to your space, not just a resident in it. That's real Feng Shui, not superstition, not magic, just clarity, direction, and the will to keep what matters. The clove reminds you stability is strategy, and strategy, when rooted in energy, always bears fruit. Peace lily, balancing emotional and interpersonal energy. In Feng Shui, the peace lily serves a function that is both subtle and profound. While many people recognize it for its air purifying qualities and elegant white blooms, its true strength lies in its ability to moderate emotional and interpersonal energy within a space. This is not merely about aesthetics or botanical beauty. It is about energetic filtration. The peace lily works on the subtle level of emotional undercurrents, those silent tensions that linger in shared spaces, the edge in conversations that can turn a simple discussion into conflict, and the invisible residue of judgment, harshness, or unspoken disappointment. In Feng Shui, this is known as excessive mental energy, characterized by sharpness, rigidity, over-criticism, intention in communication. The peace lily helps calm and rebalance this dynamic. It does not erase conflict, but rather diffuses the charge of it, offering a softer, more receptive atmosphere for dialogue, understanding, and rest. The symbolic role of the peace lily makes it a strategic plant for placement in emotionally dense zones of the home. Shared bedrooms, for example, often carry more than just rest. They absorb the emotional residue of two people navigating life together. Arguments, tension from the day, and unspoken grievances all find their way into the bedroom's energetic field. When a peace lily is placed in such a space, ideally in a neutral corner away from the headboard, it functions as a moderator, not just purifying the air, but softening the emotional language of the space. It signals a retreat from performance, from defensiveness, from the mental sharpness of the external world. It creates a cue for both people in the room to arrive differently, to speak from clarity rather than reaction. This is especially important for couples navigating stress, career fatigue, parenting tension, or misaligned schedules. The peace lily doesn't resolve the dynamic, but gives it a container that doesn't exacerbate the conflict. It absorbs the static so that what's essential can rise. Outside of bedrooms, the peace lily performs well in common areas where conflict tends to recur. This could be a dining area where conversations often escalate, a family room where children clash, or even a hallway that sits between two frequently tense zones. In these cases, its function is not ornamental, it is energetic. The plant's broad, curved leaves and slow-growing nature introduce a rhythm of stillness. Unlike spiky or fast-growing plants, which project qi outward, the peace lily draws it inward, consolidates it, and subtly re-educates the space on how to hold dialogue. If the home were a person, the peace lily would be its breath, measured, gentle, and clear. Another underutilized yet powerful location for the peace lily is near thresholds, especially doors that connect the outside world with private space. Think of a home office that sits right beside a front entrance, or a bedroom that backs up to a busy street-facing wall. These doors serve as energetic gateways between internal and external cha, and they often carry a lot of mental noise with them. Placing a peace lily near these thresholds offers symbolic filtration. It says, what is not in harmony stays outside. What is gentle, clear, and useful may enter. This symbolic barrier is subtle, but consistent placement sends a recurring energetic message that over time recalibrates how people feel in that part of the home. However, not all locations are beneficial for the peace lily. Feng Shui cautions strongly against placing it near fire element items, like stoves, fireplaces, or areas with high heat or strong yang energy. The peace lily carries primarily yin attributes, cooling, reflective, inward moving. Fire disrupts this balance. The contrast between the fire element's radiance and the peace lily's calm can create energetic confusion rather than harmony. In such pairings, neither element can perform its function well. The fire loses its clean burn, and the peace lily loses its gentle, receptive tone. For this reason, it is best to keep peace lilies out of kitchens, sun-exposed ledges, or heavily lit spaces dominated by electronics or heating appliances. In homes where conversations frequently escalate into arguments, or where communication feels clipped or too sharp, the peace lily offers an unexpected but potent form of recalibration. It doesn't change what's being said, it changes the energetic texture of how it's received. For example, in a home where a parent and teen often argue, placing a peace lily in the hallway they both pass through may soften the internal posture before the next conversation even begins. It's the plant equivalent of pausing before you respond. Not with fear, not with suppression, but with grounded clarity. That is its power. It restores a space's ability to hold tension without explosion. Moreover, from a design standpoint, the peace lily introduces visual softness. In Feng Shui, visual rhythm is a subtle but important part of spatial communication. The plant's gently arched leaves, symmetrical growth pattern, and muted colors are all qualities that soothe the nervous system. It creates a kind of visual exhale, allowing the eyes and mind to slow down. In rooms where everything is angular, metallic, or filled with sharp lines, think leather furniture, glass tables, modern lighting, the peace lily adds the necessary counterbalance to restore visual and energetic yin. In emotionally charged environments, such as homes recently touched by grief, illness, or extended tension, the peace lily also plays a symbolic role. It is often given as a sympathy plant, but its role doesn't end with the gesture. In such spaces, grief often lingers invisibly. Energy thickens. The peace lily, by absorbing this density and introducing calm oxygen flow, becomes a living representation of what the space now needs: gentleness, continuity, and breath. It does not demand attention, but it provides a consistent, supportive presence. It's also important to recognize that the peace lily teaches us something through its care requirements. It doesn't tolerate neglect. If you underwater it, the leaves droop dramatically, but once revived, they return to their full arc. This is symbolic of relationships and communication themselves. If emotional nourishment is withheld too long, connection begins to sag. But with timely attention, relationships can rebound. So when you water a peace lily, you are not just maintaining a plant. You are participating in an energetic exchange that mirrors the kind of attention needed to support emotional balance. In multi-generational homes where family members span a wide age range, the peace lily also acts as a unifying field. Children may carry fast, erratic energy. Elders may carry heavier, slower chai. Without modulation, these two frequencies clash. But with the peace lily placed in central transitional spaces, like between a playroom and a meditation space, or between a guest room and main living room, the plant helps mediate the transition. It invites one energy to slow and the other to stabilize. Over time, this physical cue informs behavior. Children may run less in certain rooms. Elders may feel less sluggish in others. The chi of the home becomes integrated rather than fractured. To summarize its full function in Feng Shui terms, the peace lily filters more than air. It filters energy, tone, intention, and expression. It allows spaces to hold multiplicity without collapse. It enables clarity without confrontation. And it absorbs the mental static that can make cohabitation exhausting rather than enriching. Its presence is not meant to fix relationships, but to hold them more gently. It does not enforce silence, it nurtures listening. And in homes where words carry weight, that might be the most important shift of all. Through its calm strength and non-imposing presence, the peace lily becomes not just a decorative plant, but an active participant in the emotional ecology of your space. It is an energetic listener, a symbolic mediator, and a living reminder that softness is not weakness. It is structure in a more sustainable form, and that, in the energetic language of the home, is one of the most powerful statements you can make. Money tree, activator of passive income. Chai among the various plants associated with wealth and prosperity in Feng Shui, the money tree, known botanically as Pachira aquatica, holds a particularly strategic role. Unlike fast-growing bamboo, which symbolizes quick gains or sudden changes in fortune, the money tree is all about long-term planning, stable accumulation, and passive financial flow. In Feng Shui terms, this is not the plant for someone chasing the next big break. It's the plant for someone building legacy wealth, the kind that doesn't come from hustle alone, but from structure, alignment, and the intelligent retention of resources. The money tree communicates a different kind of prosperity, one rooted not in reaction, but in readiness. It supports income that is consistent, scalable, and increasingly self-sustaining. That makes it one of the most important energetic tools for entrepreneurs, property investors, long-term planners, and anyone cultivating multiple income streams or future-facing financial systems. From an energetic perspective, the money tree isn't loud, fast, or flashy. It doesn't demand attention. It simply grows with quiet strength. Its thick, resilient stems and wide, lush leaves suggest both vertical development and horizontal reach. In Feng Shui, this matters. The way a plant grows is a mirror of the type of qi it holds and emits. The upward movement of the Pachira signifies aspiration, but not in the erratic sense. It rises slowly and with structure. Its wide leaves symbolize not chaos, but influence. They stretch, but don't sprawl. This translates to financial growth that expands in measured, deliberate ways, investments that compound, businesses that scale sustainably, partnerships that grow stronger over time. In a world obsessed with speed, the money tree is a reminder that wealth built wisely is wealth that endures. Placement is everything when it comes to maximizing the money tree's influence. The most beneficial placement for a money tree is near the entrance of your home or business, but with one crucial caveat: it should never be placed directly in line with the door. In Feng Shui, energy entering the front door flows forward rapidly. If the money tree is placed directly in this path, the wealth chi it gathers may pass right through and dissipate before it anchors. Instead, placing the tree slightly to the side of the entryway allows it to capture the incoming energy and redirect it inward into the home's financial field. Think of it like catching a breeze with your hand, not to stop it, but to redirect it, channel it, and use it. Another powerful location is the southeast corner of an office or workspace, known traditionally in Feng Shui as the wealth corner. This area governs not only money, but also decision-making, planning, and enterprise. By placing a money tree here, especially in a professional environment, you reinforce the energy of financial vision and execution. It's not just about wanting success, it's about making space for it to arrive, grow, and stabilize. The tree becomes a symbolic anchor for consistent inflow, but also for discernment about where and how that inflow is managed. In this location, the money tree does more than attract wealth. It teaches stewardship. The physical structure of the money tree itself also holds symbolic weight. The most iconic form features braided stems, a design not found in nature but cultivated intentionally by growers to enhance the tree's aesthetic and symbolic impact. In Feng Shui, these braided stems are interpreted as a weaving together of energies, unity of purpose, collective strength, and alignment between different areas of life. For a business owner, this could mean financial goals aligning with personal values. For a couple managing joint finances, it symbolizes cooperation, shared vision, and consolidated strength. The braid tells Chai, this is a place where efforts do not compete, they cooperate. This concept is deeply aligned with the Chinese belief in harmonized force, that multiple aligned intentions working together can produce greater and more sustainable outcomes than solo effort. The leaves of the money tree also offer meaning. Their broad, palmate shape radiates outward, reminiscent of an open hand or a sunburst. This is not just a botanical detail, it symbolizes reach, influence, and the outward projection of the financial field. The plant doesn't only hold chai, it distributes it. When placed in a high-traffic business environment, the money tree helps circulate financial energy through the space, allowing the wealth field to touch every department, desk, or interaction point. In homes, its presence in shared financial planning areas, like near a family budgeting desk or an investment document drawer, helps unify intention around financial security and future readiness. Now, from a practical care perspective, the money tree requires consistent attention, but is forgiving to minor mistakes. Another mirror of its energetic role. It doesn't require daily monitoring, but it thrives when regularly acknowledged. It prefers bright, indirect light and doesn't like to sit in soggy soil. It does best when rooted, literally and symbolically, in a stable pot with room for expansion. In this way, the plant subtly reinforces good financial habits. Check in on it weekly, adjust its position according to light and growth, trim dead leaves to encourage new ones. All of these actions mirror the behaviors needed to manage money wisely: consistency, adaptability, pruning waste, and supporting new growth. In larger Feng Shui strategy, the money tree often complements other wealth-focused elements. For instance, pairing it with a grounding earth element object, a ceramic coin bowl, a stone sculpture, or a terracotta wealth jar, can enhance its function. Earth nourishes wood in the 5-element cycle, so by adding these elements in harmony, you support the money tree's ability to grow and stabilize. Likewise, pairing it near water, features like a small indoor fountain, but not behind it, can simulate the natural conditions under which Pachira aquatica thrives and also stimulate money flow. But care must be taken. Water features should not overpower the wood energy, only support it. Overuse of water can lead to instability, just as overinvestment without grounding leads to burnout. For families seeking long-term financial stability, placing a money tree in the part of the home where legacy decisions are made, such as near an estate planning cabinet, a university savings folder, or a will, turns the plant into more than a symbol. It becomes a living companion to the weight of financial intention. In these contexts, the plant helps ground generational wealth energy. It sends a message not only about present gains, but about future security. In retail or client-facing businesses, the money tree also serves as a quiet message to customers. Its presence communicates that the space is aligned with prosperity, not just for the owner, but for those who enter. This is especially useful in wellness spaces, law offices, or coaching businesses, where the client's personal outcomes are closely tied to the energetic tone of the space. A well-placed money tree tells a subtle story. You are in a space that values growth, steadiness, and mutual benefit. It's worth noting, too, that in times of transition, a new business launch, the sale of a property, a financial pivot, the money tree provides energetic buffering. It says, wealth does not always come in fast, but it can come in strong. It affirms that what is being built is worthy of sustaining. For this reason, gifting a money tree to someone at the start of a new venture is more than a polite gesture. It is a form of energetic blessing. It communicates hope not just for success, but for successful stewardship. Finally, in Feng Shui practice, every plant you place tells a story. The money tree story is one of intention, stability, and layered success. It does not rush. It roots. It doesn't spike. It steadies. It doesn't perform loudly. It cultivates quietly. And in the energy world, that's not just aesthetics, that's wisdom. Wealth built quickly may rise fast, but it rarely lasts. Wealth built with roots endures. The money tree embodies that endurance. It invites you to see money not as a chase, but as a garden, to be designed, cultivated, and tended with patience and presence. In this way, it is not just a plant. It is an energetic contract between you and your future, asking not how much you want, but how well you are willing to grow. And in a world addicted to urgency, the money tree reminds us that real fortune waits for those who build for the long arc, not the quick hit. That is why it belongs not only in your space, but in your plan. Jade plant, reinforcer of longevity and financial recovery. In the system of Feng Shui, not every plant is designed to energize or accelerate life circumstances. Some serve a more measured, stabilizing role, quietly supporting the rhythms of recovery, resilience, and long-term restoration. The jade plant belongs to this category. Often mistaken as merely ornamental, this slow-growing succulent embodies a specific type of qi, one that is rooted in endurance, sustainability, and the deliberate rebuilding of energy after disruption. It's the plant of restoration, not revolution, of quiet rebuilding rather than dramatic transformation. And in homes where individuals are navigating aging, illness, post-layoff transitions, or emotional rehabilitation. The jade plant is not just a decorative element. It becomes a living, energetic companion that mirrors and strengthens the exact type of recovery that is being called in. Jade plants, with their thick, waxy leaves and compact structure, grow slowly and intentionally. In Feng Shui terms, this growth pattern reflects and transmits stabilizing earth energy, a grounded, yin-based frequency that promotes both physical longevity and emotional reassurance. In homes where health concerns have recently surfaced, or where financial strain has left an energetic residue, the jade plant functions as a harmonizer. It signals the body and space that speed is no longer the goal. Restoration is. It calms reactive qi. It tells the environment to shift from output to nourishment. This makes it an ideal plant for spaces where recuperation is the focus, bedrooms of elders, wellness corners with supplements or essential oils, or financial workstations that have recently been repurposed after career breaks or retirement. The jade plant's strength is not in pushing forward, it's in helping you hold your place until you're ready to begin again, and then growing with you, slowly, sustainably, without burnout. Its energetic presence is especially valuable in homes of older individuals. As we age, our yang energy, the active, outward-facing force, naturally slows. This is not a weakness. It is a shift toward inner consolidation, wisdom, and deeper qi storage. However, homes filled only with fast-moving qi through loud electronics, constant visitors, overly bright lighting, or erratic routines can disrupt this natural rhythm. The jade plant helps restore alignment between the energy of the occupant and the energy of the environment. Its stillness speaks to the body's needs. Its unhurried growth reflects the natural arc of a long life. For elders who are no longer chasing but sustaining, who are no longer building but enjoying, the jade plant offers companionship that aligns with this stage of life. But the jade plant's influence is not limited to age-related harmony. It also plays a central role in spaces of financial or professional recovery. In Feng Shui, recovery is not a state of passivity. It is an active but gentle return to alignment. Whether someone is returning to work after burnout, rebuilding a business after loss, or slowly emerging from debt, the qi they require is not fiery ambition. It is rooted sustainability. The jade plant, with its thick leaves that hold water and nutrients over time, symbolizes precisely this kind of financial and emotional buffering. It represents the ability to conserve resources, withstand pressure, and grow even when external conditions are imperfect. For this reason, it is especially suited for placement near medical cabinets, wellness drawers, and work desks where people are beginning again. Not with bravado, but with care. The southeast corner of a room or property is traditionally considered the wealth and prosperity sector in Feng Shui. However, unlike the southeast area designed for rapid wealth generation, this part of the Bagua also supports sustained well-being, especially when financial growth must walk hand in hand with health. Placing a jade plant in this sector creates a symbolic and energetic bridge between these two aspects. It says, "The money I seek is aligned with the health I maintain." It calls in not just profit, but energy that can be held, reused, and replenished. For someone managing a chronic condition while also returning to part-time work, for example, this placement tells the environment to support a balanced dual goal: income without depletion, work without collapse, achievement without sacrifice. What sets the jade plant apart from other Feng Shui greenery is not just its symbolism, but its sensory impact. It doesn't grow visibly day by day, but when you do notice growth, it feels earned. A new leaf is not just pretty, it is a testament to endurance. This visual language matters in Feng Shui. When a person in recovery sees a jade plant slowly developing, it reflects their own journey of regrowth. It's not flashy, it's not urgent, it's alive, and that is enough. There's a resonance here between the plant's behavior and the person's path. Measured, consistent, respectful of limits, but still undeniably progressing. For this reason, jade plants can be particularly supportive in therapy spaces, journaling corners, or anywhere self-reconciliation work is being done. One of the most important aspects of working with jade plants energetically is how you care for them. Unlike more fragile plants that wilt quickly when neglected, jade plants are resilient but not invincible. If left too dry for too long, they shrivel. If overwatered, they rot. This balance mirrors the care we must take with ourselves when rebuilding. Too much pressure and we crack, too little and we stagnate. So the ritual of watering your jade plant, checking its leaves and trimming it gently becomes a mindfulness tool. not in the trendy, performative sense, but in the grounded act of simply paying attention to something growing at your pace. The plant becomes a co-regulator. It thrives when you do, and it suffers when your environment falls out of rhythm. That kind of feedback loop is subtle, but in Feng Shui, it's everything. In multi-resident homes, such as when younger and older generations live together, the jade plant can also act as a symbolic neutral zone. It doesn't carry the fiery push of ambition nor the fast flutter of social energy. Instead, it introduces a middle frequency, calm, collaborative, cooperative. Placed in a shared area like the corner of a dining room or hallway table, it grounds the home in collective stability. It becomes a shared symbol of longevity, not just of life, but of relationships, understanding, and mutual respect. In a world that often celebrates change for its own sake, the jade plant reminds us that staying power is sacred. There's also something psychologically healing about the physical qualities of a jade plant. The leaves are thick and soft, almost like green coins, a feature not lost on Feng Shui practitioners who see in that shape a symbol of stored wealth. But unlike fast-spinning luck charms or metallic objects that reflect light aggressively, the jade's visual language is subdued. It suggests wealth that is built quietly, steadily, and inwardly. It tells your subconscious, I am not chasing, I am cultivating. And in a space where healing, physical, financial, or emotional is happening, that message is golden. Finally, the jade plant serves as a gentle checkpoint in the Feng Shui conversation about speed versus strength. Many people come to energy work or environmental adjustment from a place of urgency. They want things to change quickly. They want wealth fast, healing overnight, transformation now. But real change, especially when layered over past depletion, doesn't respond well to force. The jade plant is a botanical rebuttal to that urgency. It doesn't compete, it holds. It reminds you that you don't have to accelerate to be moving. That growth, to be meaningful, must be sustainable. And that sometimes the most powerful declaration you can make in your space isn't one of momentum, but of endurance. So when you look at the jade plant, don't see a succulent, see a symbol of staying power, of rebuilding without rushing, of financial recovery that aligns with your energy, not your ego. It is not there to impress. It is there to remind you that you can start again, not with pressure, but with presence, not with demand, but with design. The jade plant, in its quiet strength, becomes a living partner in your long game, not to pull you forward, but to hold you steady as you rise again. And that might be the most powerful Feng Shui alignment of all. Red aglaonema, catalyst for bold career movement. The red aglaonema is a plant that does not whisper, it declares. In Feng Shui, its energy is unmistakably fire, bold, upward, expansive, and fast. This isn't a plant you place in a corner and forget. It's a plant you place where movement is needed, where stagnation must be broken, and where visibility is no longer optional. In the 5-element cycle, fire energy is responsible for illumination, public image, dynamic growth, and the courage to act before certainty arrives. That makes the red aglaonema especially important for people whose lives have plateaued in areas of career development, ambition, or self-promotion. It's not just decorative, it's directional, and the direction it favors is forward. When energy in a space becomes dull, repetitive, or too yin, passive, slow, or quiet, the red aglaonema can reignite momentum. Its striking red or pink-veined leaves are not just beautiful, they are symbolic flares, calling attention to opportunity and initiative. In Feng Shui, color is not just visual, it's vibrational. Red represents action, decision, reputation, and breakthroughs. Unlike green, which harmonizes, or white, which clears, red is assertive. It brings energy that insists on movement. That's why this plant is a catalyst, not a comforter. It belongs in the energetic equivalent of your ignition switch, not your pillowcase. Ideal placement begins in the professional realm. For entrepreneurs, executives, creatives, or anyone whose work involves visibility and leadership, the red aglaonema performs best in office reception areas or front-facing workspaces. Its role in these zones is to announce energy that's ready to be seen, hired, elevated, or accelerated. In a reception area, it communicates to clients or guests. This is a business that is alive, bold, and future-focused. It emits a subconscious message of growth and upward motion. For businesses that have recently undergone branding changes, leadership transitions, or expansion efforts, this is the exact kind of energy needed to stabilize the new chapter. Another powerful placement is the front desk of any public-facing business. Clinics, studios, law offices, retail shops. In these locations, the first energetic impression matters. When a red aglaonema sits at or near the front desk, it acts as a Feng Shui amplifier of confidence and professionalism. It doesn't relax the space. It energizes it. It tells arriving energy and people that this is not a place of hesitation. This is a place of action. This distinction is especially important in businesses where trust and perception are key. An acupuncturist with strong but gentle chai may still benefit from a pop of fire energy near their client intake zone. A startup founder may ground their innovation-driven brand by placing a red aglaonema near their investor meeting table. It's not about ego, it's about energy that shows up with clarity and conviction. For home offices or remote work zones, the southeast corner is traditionally associated with reputation, career advancement, and public recognition. In modern homes, this space is often underutilized, tucked behind bookshelves or lost in an unused nook. But in Feng Shui, neglecting the southeast is like ignoring your future resume. It's where you code your next level. Placing a red aglaonema here sends a signal. I'm ready to be seen. It stirs energy that draws attention toward your work, your efforts, and your voice. For people who've spent too long waiting in the background, employees overlooked for promotions, artists afraid to exhibit, consultants hesitant to raise their rates. This plant acts like a subtle energetic push out of inertia. It doesn't scream, it nudges insistently until you act. Now, to ground this energetic principle in the real world, consider the career of Elon Musk. Whether you admire or criticize him, what can't be denied is the intensity of his fire energy, constant motion, unapologetic disruption, bold positioning. Musk doesn't wait for consensus. He moves, builds, announces, pivots. That's classic fire energy. He acts, then adjusts. His ventures, from Tesla to SpaceX, don't unfold slowly or carefully. They erupt, often provoking volatility, but always insisting on movement. In Feng Shui language, Musk doesn't lean on water, adaptability, earth, stability, or even metal, refinement. His dominant chai is fire, fast, visible, directional. The red aglaonema embodies a similar quality. It may not make headlines, but its energetic signature is unmistakable. It reminds the person near it that action carries its own gravity, that even imperfect visibility is more powerful than waiting indefinitely for perfection. However, fire energy, when misapplied, can burn instead of inspire. That's why placement boundaries are crucial. The red aglaonema should not be placed in bedrooms, meditation rooms, or quiet recovery zones. These are yin-based environments designed for reflection, healing, and emotional regulation. Fire energy in these spaces introduces agitation, overactivation, and difficulty sleeping or grounding. It's not about superstition, it's about energetic mismatch. A red aglaonema in the bedroom is like hosting a conference call in the middle of a nap. It disrupts the nervous system. Even in shared living areas, if the purpose of the room is family connection, soft conversation, or emotional repair, this plant's energy will feel too directive. That doesn't mean it should be banished from the home. It simply means it should be placed with intention. In transitional spaces, like stairwells or entry corridors, red aglaonema can also serve as a power redirector. In Feng Shui, these areas are known to carry high chi velocity. Energy either rushes upward too quickly, creating imbalance, or drains downward too fast, depleting motivation. A bright, fire-infused plant like this can act as a momentum buffer. On stair landings, it encourages upward movement. In entryways, it says, "Come in with purpose." In creative studios, it reignites innovation fatigue. Wherever fire needs to be added to break through stuckness, the red aglaonema belongs. Beyond career and ambition, this plant also plays a subtle role in self-esteem and confidence. Its visual boldness speaks to the subconscious in moments when motivation falters. People recovering from creative burnout, career redundancy, or public failure may find the red aglaonema serves as a symbolic co-pilot. It does not comfort, but it motivates. Its presence beside a vision board, next to a professional portfolio, or near a microphone for recording content reminds the individual, you're still in motion. You're still visible. You're not finished. That's not magic, it's psychology. And Feng Shui, when properly understood, is practical environmental psychology. The red aglaonema becomes not a miracle plant, but a strategic cue, a visual and energetic nudge that visibility is not vanity, it's vibrational. It's also worth mentioning that the plant's care needs mirror the behavior it encourages. It likes warmth, consistent attention, and a bright but indirect light. It doesn't thrive in shadows or cold, unresponsive corners. This reinforces its symbolism. Boldness requires presence. Just as fire energy needs fuel, the red aglaonema needs interaction. If neglected, its leaves fade, its edges brown, and its vibrancy diminishes. In this way, it trains the owner not just to act, but to show up consistently. Watering this plant is not just maintenance, it's a ritual of engagement. It tells your environment, I am still participating in my own momentum. For those seeking career elevation, thought leadership, or recognition in any field, the red aglaonema offers a subtle but consistent partnership. It won't get you the draw, close the deal, or finish the manuscript, but it will make your space feel ready for those things to happen. And that readiness in the energetic world often precedes the opportunity itself. It's the environmental equivalent of dressing the part before the interview is even scheduled. That's not superstition, that's resonance. So whether you're launching a brand, reopening a business, recording content, re-entering the job market, or simply tired of feeling invisible, the red aglaonema may be the chi signal your space needs to shift gears, not to overwhelm you, but to remind you that motion, even small, quiet motion, generates more alignment than endless planning ever will. You don't have to become Elon Musk, but you can, in your own way, reintroduce the fire energy that fuels forward movement. In a world that often tells us to stay safe, the red aglaonema dares us to stand out. And in Feng Shui, that's not rebellion, it's balance. Because without visibility, your gifts stay locked inside the walls of your home. And no plant, no matter how beautiful, can grow in the dark forever. Dumb cane, harmonizer of multi-generational chi. The dumb cane, known botanically as Dieffenbachia, is more than just a striking foliage plant with dramatic green and white variegation. In Feng Shui, it holds a deeply functional role within the energetic ecosystem of a multi-generational home. It is not a plant that pushes or pulls. It harmonizes. It listens to fast chai and slow chai simultaneously. and somehow bridges the gap. In traditional Asian households, the metaphor of family lineage is simple and profound. The elders are the roots, and the children are the branches. But what many homes struggle with is the tension between those roots and branches, between tradition and change, silence and motion, wisdom and impulse. The dumb cane is not a solution to that dynamic, but it is a plant that supports coexistence, energetic blending, and mutual respect between generations who often live under the same roof but vibrate at entirely different speeds. This ability to absorb and balance clashing frequencies is what gives the dumb cane its specific energetic value. Children carry quick, erratic, expressive chai, the kind that bounces, explores, questions, and disrupts. Elders carry grounded, inward, reflective chai, the kind that preserves, remembers, slows, and observes. When these two energies meet without modulation, the home can feel either too agitated or too stagnant. That's where the dumb cane becomes essential. Its by dense leaves absorb excess movement, while its slow, steady growth mirrors the kind of chi that gives younger energy a container. It doesn't suppress expression, it softens it. It doesn't stimulate lethargy, it stabilizes momentum. It acts as an energetic equalizer between generations who might otherwise feel like they're occupying different worlds under the same roof. Placement is key to activating this harmonizing role. One of the most effective locations for a dumb cane is near stairwells. In Feng Shui, staircases are not simply structural elements. They are chi conduits. They carry energy between floors, just as conversations, habits, and emotions travel between age groups. But when a staircase is energetically noisy, meaning energy rushes up or down too fast, it creates disconnection between levels. Children might dominate upstairs with tech, movement, and sound. Elders downstairs may feel dismissed or energetically forgotten. Placing a dumb cane at the landing or base of the stairs helps stabilize that current. It slows rushing chi. It creates an energetic pause, a space of neutrality. It helps both fast and slow chi move with more awareness, less friction. Family living rooms are another ideal location. These are the zones where cross-generational interaction most frequently takes place. Whether it's grandparents watching TV with grandchildren, parents managing screen time while preparing dinner, or teenagers walking through while on their phones, the living room becomes a charged intersection of multiple life rhythms. The dumb cane, placed in a corner or beside a communal seating area, serves as a visual and energetic mediator. It doesn't command attention like a bright red plant might, but it does command a quieter tone. It invites stillness without requiring silence. Its thick leaves and slow posture project the message: we are here together, and there is room for all our tempos. In hallways and transitional zones, places often overlooked in design but crucial in energetic movement, the dumb cane provides structure without interference. These spaces may seem insignificant, but in Feng Shui, they act like the nervous system of the home. Qi travels through them to reach its destinations. When those routes are narrow, rushed, or emotionally charged, they can transmit stress, impatience, or miscommunication. A dumb cane in a hallway reminds the home to breathe between rooms. It adds softness to movement, and in doing so, subtly shifts how people enter and exit conversations, meals, and moments of shared presence. But the most powerful contribution of the dumb cane is symbolic. In cultures that revere family lineage and intergenerational continuity, there is often an unspoken tension between honoring the past and allowing for the future. Elders hold the memory, children hold the momentum. One wants to preserve, the other wants to explore. The dumb cane says, both can exist here. Its growth pattern reflects that philosophy. It does not shoot upward rapidly, but neither does it shrink away. It reaches cautiously, steadily and symmetrically. Its variegated leaves, neither fully green nor white, mirror the idea of duality existing in balance. It is the physical embodiment of integration, root and branch held within the same system. This symbolic function becomes especially meaningful in moments of transition. When a grandparent moves in, when a child is born into a home that has known only adults, when the family dynamic shifts due to illness, retirement, adolescence, or caretaking responsibilities. These shifts are not just logistical, they are energetic. They alter the chi map of the space. The dumb cane, introduced during these times, serves as a stabilizing agent. It tells the space and the people in it that change can happen without collapse. That adaptation is not abandonment. That tradition and transformation can stand beside each other without conflict. Even the care of the dumb cane reinforces this message. It is not a plant that demands constant attention, but it does require consistency. Overwatering leads to rot. Underwatering leads to crisp edges. Direct sun scorches. Deep shadow stalls growth. In this way, the plant trains the household, whether consciously or not, to practice moderation, to observe, to respond. Not everything needs to be fast. Not everything needs to be delayed. Balance, in the presence of diverse energies, requires participation from all sides. The dumb cane does not grow in chaos or neglect. It grows in attentive, balanced environments, just like families. For homes navigating intergenerational stress, conflicts over parenting styles, dietary traditions, technology use, schedules, the dumb cane can be part of a larger strategy to design the space not just for function, but for feeling. Pairing it with earth element decor, stone bowls, clay figures, brown tones, reinforces its stabilizing effect. Avoid placing it near loud electronics or fire-heavy zones like stoves, fireplaces, or brightly lit television units. It is not a fire plant. It is a gentle wood-earth hybrid. It stabilizes rather than energizes, receives rather than projects. In the language of Feng Shui, every object either harmonizes with the family story or disrupts it. The dumb cane does not erase tension. It acknowledges it. Then it holds space for what might come next. Listening, patience, the pause before reaction. It is not a magical fix, but its energetic signature speaks to the part of the home that wants to hold everyone, child and elder, past and future, fast and slow, in a shared space without asking any of them to disappear. And that is its greatest strength. The dumb cane does not demand unity. It allows for coexistence. That alone is a form of wisdom. In a household with multiple generations, that wisdom is not only welcome, it is necessary. Not every plant in Feng Shui needs to be a wealth magnet or a fame activator. Some, like the dumb cane, are simply there to help you live better together, to speak less loudly and hear more clearly, to walk past each other without losing connection. And in today's homes, where generations often collide more than they integrate, that kind of energetic support is not just useful, it's essential. The truth is, a plant isn't just something you put in a pot and forget about. In Feng Shui, it becomes part of the conversation your home is already having with your life. Each leaf, each placement, each corner tells the story of what you value, what you are ready to receive, and what you may still be holding on to. These 9 plants we've explored, aloe vera, clove, peace lily, money tree, jade plant, red aglaonema, dumb cane. They're not decorative upgrades. They're directional tools. They take your intention, whether it's for wealth, balance, health, visibility, or healing, and turn it into structure. That's what true Feng Shui does. It doesn't just clear space. It codes space. It teaches energy where to land, how to move, and most importantly, where to stay. So here's what I invite you to do next. Don't try to change everything overnight. Just choose one plant in one spot in your home that feels neglected, heavy, or blocked. Maybe it's that corner near your entrance that's never felt welcoming. Maybe it's the desk that's lost its clarity. Or maybe it's the place where you sit in silence, wondering what comes next. Choose one plant that speaks to the chi you want to shift. Place it with care. Watch it. Tend to it. And most importantly, observe how you feel over the next 9 days, not with judgment, with curiosity. Feng Shui is not magic, it's relationship between you and your environment, between your present energy and your future self. And plants, when placed with clarity, become the quiet collaborators that hold space for your next chapter. They anchor the new rhythm before the results appear. They turn your home into a space that doesn't just reflect who you were, but who you're becoming. So let me ask you gently, what area of your home feels stuck right now? What part of your environment is echoing a version of your life you're ready to update? Drop it in the comments below. I read them, and I learn from you too. And if this video gave you insight, stirred your thinking, or simply offered a moment of reflection, I'd be grateful if you helped me share that energy forward. Like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the New Day Mindfulness channel so I can continue creating more grounded, thoughtful, and practical content like this. I'm on a journey to reach 2,000 subscribers, and each one brings us closer to building a community of people who want their homes to hold more meaning and their lives to hold more flow. Because in the end, a plant well placed is not a charm. It's a message. It says, I care about this space. I care about what flows through it. I care about what stays. And when your space begins to care back, you'll feel it. Quietly, fully, unmistakably.